Here is a video about the home inspection and what happens once you go into contract and you have a home inspection. Let's talk about time frame. On your contract, you've probably put down anywhere between 3 days to 7 days for your time frame. You've chosen one of two types of inspection, either a void only, where you get to do an inspection only and void the contract or move forward. The second option is home inspection with right to negotiate. This option allows you to do your inspections, and if you find anything at fault with the property, you can then come back to the seller and say, we would like the following items repaired. Who are we going to recommend that you use as your inspector? I use, as one of my preferred inspection companies, Insight Inspections. They have a selection of about 10 different inspectors that I've worked with on numerous occasions, and they do a great job inspecting and looking at the whole house to make sure that you are aware, eyes wide open, of what it is you're buying. Insight Inspection, they do 4 types of inspection. They do the home inspection, the radon inspection, a mold inspection, and an air quality inspection, as well as a pest inspection. Okay, guys, there are 7 types of inspections that you can get for a property. Let's talk about the top 3. Let's talk about the first, which is a standard home inspection. This is a 360 of the exterior of the home, the entire interior. They're looking at the electrical, they're looking at the plumbing, they're looking at the HVAC, they're looking at the attic, they're looking at the crawl space, they're running all of your appliances, they're looking at the chimney, they're looking at the flue, they're looking at everything that is a visual part of this inspection. On the exterior, they're looking at the siding, they're looking at the deck, they're looking at the roof. They're checking everything that we would have checked out when we were doing our buyer tours. The second thing that I recommend is radon inspections. The reason I want you to think about radon is because this is something that is naturally occurring in the air. You breathe it in. However, there are certain levels where it might become toxic for your body. I'm going to read this now because it's confusing, but radon level in homes are measured in picocuries per liter, PCI/L, of air. The EPA recommends fixing homes with radon levels at or above 4 PCI/L. Now, think about this. You breathe radon naturally in the air. However, if you're in the basement and you have a radon test done over a 48-hour period, and those levels end up being less than 4 PCI/L, then you're fine. You don't have to remediate anything. However, we just bought a house in Fairfax, and those levels were above 7, and we needed to remediate that. So we ended up getting that covered by the seller. They covered our cost to have a radon remediation device installed in the house. So that's another inspection that I recommend you get if there's a basement. The third inspection, which technically is not part of the inspection period, it's actually part of the main contract, is wood destroying insects, or a pest inspection. So what an inspector is doing is they're going around the property, they're looking at the foundation, they're looking in the attic, they're looking at the crawl space, they're looking to see if there's any evidence of wood destroying insects like termites or carpenter bees that might be eating at the foundation or eating parts of the wood around the property. This only costs about $50 to maybe $100 to get done. Definitely needs to be done, because if there are live insects found, the seller per contract must repair that. However, if there's old damage, this is not required to be repaired by the seller. It's just for your information. Those are the 3 items. Let's talk about pricing. So your home inspection is going to cost anywhere between $500 to $1,000 based on the size of the house. So if it's like a 6,000 square foot house, and that's going to take probably 3 to 4 hours of your time, that's going to cost probably closer to that $1,000 mark. But if it's like a townhouse or a condo, you're probably circling around $500 for the cost of that home inspection. The radon is a pretty standard number, usually between $150 to $200. That now costs the 48-hour time frame that the radon device is in the house, and then it goes to a lab, and then you get the results thereafter. The pest inspection, like we stated, will probably cost anywhere between $50 to $100, and this is just to make sure that you are getting the results and a guarantee that they will repair the work and any work recommended afterwards. Four more inspection types to think about in the event you need to have them. The first one is your well and septic inspection. If you're buying a house which is a little bit further out in the suburbs, maybe you've got a lot of land on that premises, maybe it's in a community that doesn't have public water or public sewer. That's when you're going to have a well and a sewer, or rather a septic system. So to get a well inspected, you're going to have someone who's going to test the water to see what the metals are like, to see if there's any bad chemicals in there, and to see if there's anything which is bad for you to drink. That's the first test, right? They're also going to see if the well is functioning as intended. The second test that you're going to have is the septic inspection, and that covers looking at the septic field, prodding it to make sure there's no issues. You can also do what's called an orange dye test, and that makes sure, they put orange dye inside. If it comes out, that's a problem, right? But if there's no issues, you're fine in that regard. The third part of that septic inspection is no longer visual. It's breaking out the whole septic system, digging it out, looking at the expansion tanks, looking at everything else that's under the ground. Now, let's talk about costs. For a standard well inspection, that's about $150. For a septic inspection, that's usually anywhere between $300 to $500 or more, depending on how much of the ground you need to dig up. I actually had a house in Haymarket, Virginia, where they had to dig out the whole thing. It cost about $3,000 to dig everything else out, then the inspection, then the repairs, and then cover it back up. It came out to about $20,000 total. So bear in mind, if you're going to do one of those inspections, you want to hope that the seller has already done this inspection in advance and is providing you with the report, so you don't need to worry about that part. But generally, a septic inspection is a visual inspection, and your cost is anywhere between $300 to $1,000. A chimney inspection is another thing that you can do as well. So your home inspector is going to be able to do a general inspection, which looks up the flue, and they're going to look at the outside with binoculars, maybe get on the roof and tell you if there's any damage to the cap of the chimney. If you get a chimney inspection done, you've got two options. The first one is they're going to do a visual, very much similar to what the home inspector has done. Really, if you're going to get an inspector out there, a chimney inspector, you want to have a level 2, which is where they use a camera to go inside the chimney flue. They're going to look at the brick integrity inside. They're going to see if there's any creosote inside to see if that would cause a potentially house fire. And they're going to look at the top to see if there's any damage from the ceramic or the roof chimney at the top, and let you know their estimate for whether or not the chimney is in good shape, if it needs to be repaired, if you need a new chimney or firebox, if it needs to be serviced or cleaned. They're going to give you a recommendation and a price thereafter. The challenge with doing a chimney inspection is that you're not getting that done within the first 7 days. That needs to be lined up day one, get them out there immediately, because they're usually pretty solidly booked, and generally you're looking at maybe a 3 to 5 day return on that report. So if you want a chimney report, let your real estate agent know day one that you want that done, so we can book that day one. Otherwise, we're looking at a challenge of getting someone out there within the time frame that we've put down on this inspection. Now, if you put down you're doing only a 3-day inspection, you can say goodbye to a chimney inspection. But if you have a full 7 days, this is why you need to plan this in advance for before you do an offer, how many days you need for that chimney inspection. If you were walking around the house, and especially in the basement, you found potentially mold under the stairs, or what looks like a black microbial item under the stairs that looks like mold, I would recommend that you also get a mold inspection done. Now, if it's obvious, paying for a mold inspection is just an additional cost on top of what the home inspector will say looks like microbial growth here in the basement. If you want to take it one step further and you want to get the exact results for what you have, because you want to get the seller to pay for it, getting an actual mold inspection would probably be best for you. But it's just like the other inspections that we have that are extra. They take a little bit more time, because what they need to do is they need to take that to a lab, and it takes 2 to 3 days to measure the growth of the mold to find out what it is. So if you're going to do a mold inspection, make sure you're doing that early on in the process. And if you're doing a 7-day home inspection, you can get that time frame done. That's a mold inspection, important to have if you want to know what kind of mold is in the property. The last possible inspection that you could do is a structural inspection. Now, if you're walking around the property and you see massive structural cracks, or you see the roof is wonky like this, or you see a big crack in the foundation and something's sinking, you're still buying this house, and apparently that hasn't scared you away. But your home inspector, again, does a visual inspection. A structural engineer is going to come around and tell you how much it's going to cost to make sure that the house goes from this position back to this position. That's an additional $500 to $1,000. They take a little bit longer to get your report back to you. But if the goal is to find out as much as you can about the property and the home inspection by itself is not going to kick it for you, then doing a structural engineer inspection, getting that report back is going to be the best possible thing for you to do for your peace of mind and learning what you need to learn about this property. The structural inspection also costs anywhere between $500 to about $1,000. When you finish with the home inspection, ideally within that 3 to 7 day time frame, our inspection team is going to get you a report back by the same day. Most likely, if you had it done in the morning or the afternoon, you'll have your report by the evening. What's next? Well, we need to present to the seller within our initial time frame. So again, if we put 3 days down, we need to get it to them within those 3 days. If we put 7 days down, within those 7 days, we need to do the inspection and get the report, and then come to the seller with our outline of what it is we would like them to repair within that time frame. Let's just say that you get a list of 16 pages of damage or things that need to be repaired or things that need to be looked at or noticed in the future and maintained. The thing about home inspections, guys, is it's not about asking for everything, especially if it's a resale house. We're going to look for health, safety, electrical, and plumbing issues. Those are the 4 main things we're going to look for. Let's just say that there's no smoke detectors in the house. That's a safety violation. We need to make sure that gets fixed. Let's just say that there's an active leak. We want to make sure that gets fixed. Let's just say that there's some loose live wires in the house. We want to make sure that gets fixed. If there are things that are big ticket items, like the radon in the basement, we find out that needs to be replaced, that would be about $1,000 to $2,000 for you to get that fixed. I would say that's pretty big. But if they're pretty small things, like you need to cork around the tub to stop water penetration, or maybe the grout in the shower is loose and that might cause water penetration, or there's not a plug holding on this and blah, blah, blah. Small things like that, you want to leave to the side because again, you're buying a resale, it's not a perfect house. But if there are big ticket items or things that really are dangerous, we're going to ask the seller to repair those. Or if you'd rather not have a repair, you can always ask the seller to credit you for those items. Now, I'm not talking about, okay, well, we need the radon remediated or we need the radon repaired. We want $25,000. It doesn't work that way. It has to be kind like the amount that it would be if you were having them repaired themselves. So we must be fair in this process. The goal is to get the seller to either repair or credit you for the work to be done so that you can move forward in the process. The point of the inspection is to ask for repairs for damage or broken items. This is not an opportunity to get upgrades, so you can't ask for a new roof because the roof is 25 years old. You can't ask for a new bathroom because it's dated. It's only if something is broken. So if the roof is 50 years old, yet it's still functioning totally fine, it's not an opportunity to get that upgraded. After we've sent over our request to the seller, they have anywhere between 1 to 3 days to respond to us, give us an answer as to whether or not they're going to give you a credit or what they're going to repair or what they're not going to repair, because they can choose to take things off the list and send it back to us. And then at the end of that, we have 1 day or 2 days to say, okay, great, this is what we'll accept, this is what we won't accept, or we're going to void the contract because we're no longer interested in dealing with you. So you have choices, you have ways out of the contract, but this whole process is all about negotiating and having the option to say yes or no to something or get a credit so you can move forward to the next stage. And that is the home inspection, guys. I hope this has been useful for you. Let me know which one you're planning on doing, the timeframes, all that fun stuff. And when we get under contract, this is the whole home inspection period. Thanks for watching.